So, judge ready? Opponents ready? My time starts now. Our definition. Cooperative finance institutes that public infrastructure is owned and operated by the public and they are open to the general public for use. Encyclopedia Britannica defined welfare programs as a variety of governmental programs designed to protect the citizens from economic risks and insecurities of life. Our framework is based around the word effective. We believe that effective poverty alleviation covers all groups of people and for all kinds of poverty, including relative poverty, extreme poverty, and chronic poverty. Most importantly, effective means that the investment to benefit ratio is larger than that of my opponent. Judge, we believe that is the best way to measure effectiveness in this debate. Our contention one is education. Subpoint A is welfare encourages students to pursue higher education. Status quo. Joe 2018 says that only 20% to 30% of rural students go to public high school, in contrast to 70% among their urban peers. There were 1.1 million children illegally dropping out of compulsory education in 2018 to work because their family is in poverty. Welfare programs can keep impoverished children from dropping out. For example, Sun 2013 did an experiment program that gave 1,500 RMB as a compensation each extra year for impoverished families to keep their children in school. In addition, you can keep extra awards to children who have a considerable improvement in their school performance or work hard on their homework. Another experiment program wanted in 2017. So instead of dropping out of work, doing well in school is like these children's jobs. Both experiments were shown effective. The first one reduced the dropout rate by 60%, and the second showed large progress in these children's studies. The World Bank concluded that a household has only 0.6% of fallen into poverty, with the laborer having received 12 years or more of education. Subpoint B is increased spending on vocational training programs. We should increase spending on vocational training programs because they are largely effective. For example, the World Bank reported that in 2015, that in Norway, by 2014, the percentage of graduates entering employment within 6 months increased to 98.2%. These vocational training programs can help many adults who did not receive adequate education when they were young, since many among people born in 1982, 2% of those had never received school education, and 11% whose highest education level is primary school. However, 61 2017 also said that tuition fees can be prohibitively expensive for poor rural families. With vocational training programs, people gain long-term skills. With competency skills, there are job opportunities everywhere, and this alleviates poverty as households can have a higher steady income and lift themselves out of poverty. Contention 2 is welfare is more effective at alleviating poverty for people with no job opportunities. Subpoint A, increased spending on pension. Status quo. June 2012 reported that there were 167 million people over 60 in 2009, while Young 2018 says that it has already reached 230 million in 2016. Han said it will expand to 366 million in 2050. Because of this, we need to expand pension, or more specifically, the Universal Senior Allowance Program. The benefit level of pension is very low, only 81 yuan per month. Moreover, the benefit level varies from region to region. Like Shanghai is 5 times higher than that of Kunming. Therefore, by increasing spending on pension systems, we can effectively alleviate poverty. Subpoint B, disabilities. Among 12 million people in China live with mental disorders and intellectual disabilities, and 8 million, about 67% of them are in poverty. Wu of the Shanghai Disabled Persons Federation believes that the government needs to establish better care resources for adults with disabilities. As their parents age, the question of future becomes increasingly pressing, and they cannot receive a job offer. In fact, less than 10% of adults with autism can find a job. We need welfare programs to help these people because they are either unable to work or refused by others, and welfare is the only solution. For example, in May, an 83-year-old woman in the southern city of Guangzhou drugged her 43-year-old son, who had an intellectual disability. She said, "I am afraid that I'll die before him. I owe him for giving birth to him with this disability, making him suffer so much. I would rather commit the crime and put an end to the pain in his life, because in the case, it was better for him to die than live." Judge, if you vote for the other side, you're accepting that we live in a world where old mothers kill their disabled children. We are proud to.
Your time's up.
Can you run a prep time for 30 seconds? Prep time, 30 seconds.
Granted. Count prep time, 30 seconds.
I'm all set.
You can start when you're ready.
My time starts now. So in this debate, we support increased infrastructure spending in China, and that increased infrastructure spending can alleviate poverty better. So definitions. Welfare programs are defined as programs that by the government that provide money to the needy, which are those with tiny incomes, those with no jobs, and those disabled to work. And infrastructure means programs that help improve the life quality of all citizens, new roads, hospitals, and the internet. Also, it includes the services that comes with it, like teachers, doctors, and others. Poverty means in the state of being not able to sustain one's own life, and standards are usually defined by the local government or by the World Bank. The 2010 rural poverty line is 2,300 RMB per person per year. Pro has to prove that welfare programs can have several other benefits to it. My first contention is infrastructure creates more job opportunities that are effective and helpful. And my second contention is that welfare programs are not as useful as infrastructure in fighting rural poverty. So my first contention, infrastructure is all about building projects, and these projects have to hire a lot of people. That creates a lot of job slots. For example, building a school requires a construction company, an engineering corporation, and a designer or a team of designers. This creates a lot more job slots, and these jobs are all low education jobs except for the designer team. According to Kane 2015, every 1 billion spent on infrastructure creates 13,000 jobs. Construction of a project does not need the workers to be highly educated. The people only have to operate with drills, with tractors, with some heavy machinery that are not very dangerous and they don't require a lot of education. So the younger workforce generation of the impoverished families can go to work at construction sites. And these jobs and the salary these jobs bring are directed to the poor, since they're the only ones who are willing to do this work and get money. So there are no other jobs in the status quo that directly benefit the poor people. Jobs in the city are not suitable for these people since these jobs require a much higher educational result. Additionally, there are very less construction jobs in the city. So rural construction jobs benefit people the most, and these infrastructure are surely beneficial for the impoverished people as well. Second, welfare programs are not as useful as infrastructure in fighting rural poverty. Infrastructure is the most effective way to fight rural poverty. Rural poverty is mainly caused by the lack of front-edge technology and modernized societies. Infrastructure adds to a rural county without ripping up its original culture. There's a county in Tibet called Medak. It is surrounded by tall mountains and has only 3 openings compatible for roads to the outside world. Construction of the Medak road took 4 decades, but after it's finally built, the world saw a great leap of economy for Medak. There are more urbanized buildings and 4G internet connection. Tens of thousands of tourists visit Medak annually to challenge themselves with multiple terrain-high peaks. The county officially made it out of poverty, and this did not destroy the original culture of the town, but it adds more joy and more wealth to it. However, Medak is only a small example in the infrastructure poverty alleviation process. There are many counties like Akito, Yangazar, Yarkand, and Kagilik in Xinjiang yet to be alleviated out of poverty, and they all lack proper infrastructure. Pictures show that these towns have only dirt roads and farmhouses as schools, and after they get alleviated out of poverty, the towns with touristic features can advertise tourism, like Yangasar has a tomb for an ancient king, and also those without any features can still use the roads and cars built to distribute over the whole country and earn money to bring back. When these rich people go back, towns can be alleviated out of poverty quickly. Also, welfare does not stop the growth of poverty in rural areas. As the number of impoverished people increase, the amount of money the government has to pay for these people's welfare also increase. This is a larger economic output for the government, although the country gets more and more impoverished people. In conclusion, infrastructure creates more job opportunities and it's more useful in fighting rural poverty. So we urge you to have a con ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, speaker. Now let's move to the first crossfire. Speaker 1 of both sides, please get ready. The pro side, you should start by asking your question.
Okay, so judge ready, opponents ready, my time starts now. How do you know all of the 13,000 jobs are simple jobs that require no skill?
But I can prove that a majority of the jobs at construction sites are low education jobs, because construction sites, as I said, only the designers in the construction sites need a lot of education.
But then that doesn't match the evidence.
My evidence was that My evidence was that every 1 billion spent on infrastructure creates 13,000 jobs. And what I just said is common sense. It could be observed in real life. And you can just know that there are a lot of people, impoverished people working at construction sites. So it's my
Okay, so that card is, wait, a follow-up. That card is American evidence.
So that card is American evidence, but think of it. In America, the construction sites are no different to construction sites in China. You all have designers construction.
It's not about China. How is it no different? Can you provide evidence that America is not different from China?
I'm not saying that America is not different from China. I'm just saying that the ways of constructing buildings is the same. You need the same kinds of people in the same
China has the most public infrastructure than any other economy. And how is public infrastructure only construction sites?
I'm just taking an example of construction sites. And as I already said, infrastructure also includes soft infrastructure, which is the services provided with infrastructure. Now, let's move on to my question. So in your speech, you talked about how welfare programs urge to a higher education for people, but in a lot of rural counties, as I just said, the schooling conditions are very bad, and there are some places there are literally no schools. How are people going to have higher education if there are no schools? And we need infrastructure to build more schools.
Okay, so according to my evidence, China has already spent 542.6 billion yuan on public infrastructure, and this is from ChinaDaily.com, and it's from 2019. So it's very recent evidence, and it's very reliable. And that's education infrastructure only. So
I'm just raising individual examples to show why we need more infrastructure in China. I'm just breaking it down into a lot of points. Do you have a problem with that? No.
What do you mean?
So you questioned me about talking about education, but education is a type of infrastructure. I'm just explaining that.
Okay, so you said that giving money to people is not public infrastructure. It's welfare.
It's not. It's welfare. So giving money to people cannot get them to school when there are no schools.
Now let's move to rebuttal speech. Speaker 2 of the pro side, get ready for a speech.
Oh, like 1 minute prep time, thank you.
Granted. Your time's up. You can start when you're ready.
Okay, so opponents ready, judge ready, my time starts now. So the first contention was about like how infrastructure can create job opportunities. So for that, my response is that they gave like 2 evidences. The first evidence was that like these jobs are like low skilled, so only the poor people would be willing to do these jobs. And then they gave this great evidence about how 1 billion can generate like 13,000 jobs. However, this is actually American evidence, and then it's $1 billion, so it's actually around somewhere between 6 billion and 7 billion yuan. And since these evidences don't match up, so they can't prove that all of these 13,000 jobs are for the poor. They can't prove that. And since like my partner said in the crossfire, China has spent a lot of infrastructure, much more different from any other country. In fact, in 2015, they borrowed up to 250% of the GDP to spend on public infrastructure. So this is not like any other economy. So I just proved that you can't really use this American evidence to talk about the China. And then the second one was about how welfare is not as effective because we need they somehow need the public infrastructure first, because, and then they gave this example about Tibet. But I actually have a problem with individual examples, because if you want to use individual examples, you'll have to relate it to the whole picture. And then I'm going to prove why welfare is actually much better. Yes, we confess that welfare, there is in fact like mistargeting, but for the public infrastructure, it can cause a financial crisis, and corruption is actually helps the economy. Like Locatelli 2017 said that corruption may have a positive impact on economic growth because it can make the bureaucrats work harder because bribes motivate them. It can avoid the red tape, and it can act as a helping hand to attract foreign direct investments. And then there's about how there's like the financial crisis. For that, like I said, for the financial crisis, China has spent 250% of GDP in borrowing to spend on public infrastructure, but it was only 140% of GDP of borrowing in 2008. So this shows that if obviously there's a risk of financial crisis if we spend even more on public infrastructure. So like actually the impacts of like spending more on public infrastructure is even, the negative impacts of it is even larger than that of welfare programs. And now I want to like provide an example of about educational infrastructure, also defending our education contention. So like, as my partner said in the crossfire, the central and local governments has already spent 542.6 billion yuan on like improving the school qualities of like rural schools, and that now 90% of the schools already have a laptop, and that like it said, the Ministry of Education said on Tuesday that rural education in China has seen major improvements when it comes to facilities, equipment, and teacher quality. And then they kind of argue that education is infrastructure, but we're talking about education by giving money to the families of the students. We're not talking about like teachers. So I think they kind of misunderstood our point about the education contention. And last, I want to talk about corruption for the like infrastructure. For that, there's like this really bad school which caused hundreds of millions of yuan, but then after that they were torn down because it was too expensive. This was from like a Shanxi province. It was a new public high school, and it was really good. Oh, I just collapsed all my opponent's arguments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, speaker. Now let's move to speaker 2 of the Kang side. Please get ready for your rebuttal speech.
Thank you. Just wait a moment. Okay. Judges ready? Opponents ready? My time will start now. In my speech, I will rebut points on which the opposite team stands. First of all, welfare does not improve education. In Shandong province, there are schools in which the average class size is 80 students, China Daily tells us. The national standard is 45. 40% of classes in primary and secondary schools were oversized. Research has shown that new facilities is the only way to help the situation with quality. The odds of graduating after having attended small classes for 4 years increased by about 80%, says Finn and Gerber, 2005, which tells us that improved facilities is the most efficient factor for quality education, not what they claim. It is overt that we need an increase in educational facilities. Again, we want to repeat that infrastructure includes the services provided, like healthcare and education. The increase of educational infrastructure, therefore, will also mean a raise in the quality of the teaching workforce. For adults, their education is included in soft infrastructure, which includes education, healthcare, and job support. So this is not actually in the provision of the other side. On the other end, welfare already supports students with a 9-year compulsory education program, which 99% of school-age children took part in 2018 and has risen ever since. If this immense project is not working, what will work on the front of welfare? The other team raises numbers that sound like they worked, but they do not compare the cost to any input. This means that they cannot make sense of their evidence. Here we have said that first, educational welfare already covers the people who need it. Second, overcrowding is a significant problem stemming from the lack of schools. And third, better environments is key to effective and quality learning. Second, welfare distribution is problematic. The supposed speed of welfare distribution and its immediacy brings problems the other side has not addressed. The mistargeting rate has risen with years, an example being from 2002 when the rate was 73% to 5 years after when the rate increased 3% Gulf states. This shows the worsening of welfare targeting. For every 1 RMB given to beneficiaries, Kakwani states, 3.4 RMB are spent on administrative costs. The returns of Dibao, the most important welfare program of welfare in China, is negative 70%, Kakwani says again. On the other side, while the national debt of China is 39 trillion RMB, the debt of infrastructure is a mere 10%. This percentage is completely insufficient, improving infrastructure to be hurtful. Therefore, the other team cannot say that infrastructure is not beneficial. The two-way problem with welfare distribution that we will show now proved the near impossibility of a logical distribution method. We'll be using the scenario of Dibao, the most important welfare program in China here. In the first case, welfare processes are strict, bringing with it intrusiveness. Smith 2020 explains that after a potential recipient files a written Dibao application, their houses and their workplaces of work are searched. If welfare processes are too loose, however, it brings with it mistargeting, which we have just mentioned. Lee 2016 also notes that about 86% of Dibao recipients were actually ineligible. This is also partly contributed to by the stigma or shame of poverty and welfare. The other team cannot assume that morality issues will be magically solved. Next, welfare does not benefit the aged. A clear upward motion of pension funding has been shown in website statista.com, and so has a graph showing the populations receiving pension support. From 2009 to 2019, the amount of people receiving pension insurance rose a shocking 33 million. However, China is lacking critical infrastructure. For example, 20% of the Chinese population still do not have access to the clean water system, suggesting a need in increased facilities and not increased welfare. Now, infrastructure creates 3 tiers of jobs, Schwartz says. First, secondary and tertiary. The other team is ignoring a large part of the society by ignoring secondary and tertiary impacts, meaning their view cannot be taken as a holistic one. So our argument on jobs stands. In a country like China, where 20 million new jobs are needed this year, as Liang 2020 stated, infrastructure investment is an extremely essential factor. 50 million people are unemployed this year, which is the amount of people that we will be helping. Therefore, we think that infrastructure investment will be more essential than welfare investment.
Your time's up. Let's move to second crossfire. Speaker 2 of both sides, please get ready. The pro side, you should start by asking your question.
Okay, so my time starts now. So my first question is, you talked about mistargeting for Dibao, right? But as I said, there's increased spending on public infrastructure can lead to a financial crisis. So are you saying that the mistargeting rate, the impact of mistargeting is larger than the impact of a financial crisis?
And what is the rate or percentage or possibility of a financial crisis?
We need to find that evidence, but
okay, sorry, then your point does not stand.
No, we will give you the evidence. We just need to find it in the whole packet.
Okay, then.
What is your question?
Are you taking into consideration soft infrastructure? Because when you talk about the education that adults should have and the disabled should have the support they have, are you taking into consideration soft infrastructure?
So like for vocational training, are you talking about like you need services, like you need to teach these people?
What do you suggest the adults needed in your partner?
Yes, okay. So like for the vocational training, like someone has to teach them to do this and that, right? But we're not saying that we already have these people. The vocational training program is actually very successful, but what we're saying is that like 6stone reported that it is very expensive for the poor. So all we're saying is that we want to give this poor make the vocational training program less cheaper, especially for the people in poverty.
And you can ensure that they will participate in these programs.
Yes, because the employment rate increased to 98.2%. And then there's a ton of examples about how a woman talks about
But the problem is you don't address.
Can I ask my
what the
question
people-
first, and then
what
you
the
can
peop-
ask another question, okay?
Just finish my sentence. Let me just finish my sentence. You have not addressed how the people that are still left in poverty, that has not been benefited by welfare, that they were participating in, how are they like?
It's a very long sentence, but I'll just ask my question.
Yeah, you
So
can.
you were kind of saying that there's overcrowding, right? But actually that the evidence is from China Daily 2016, but our evidence about how the government spent 542.6 billion yuan and how there's already large improvement for the rural schools is from 2019. So are you denying that in these 3 or 4 years, China hasn't improved on the facilities of rural schools?
Okay, but still, neither no one has proven that there's a sufficient amount of educational facilities right now.
I already proved it. This government spent 542 billion yuan.
Okay, you only proved how much that you spent, and again, this is where your problem occurs. You don't relate the cost to the input to what you get, and
You
also
spend
to
this much, and you
Wait, sorry,
still
I'm
need to
still
spend more.
speaking.
It only means
to
that
how
Your
much.
time's up.
Okay,
Thank you very
how
much.
much the country spends in total. Thank you.
Now, speaker one of the pro side, please get ready for a summary speech.
1 minute prep time, please.
Granted. Your time's up.
30 seconds more, please. Thank you.
Granted. Your time's up. You can start when you're ready.
Judge ready? Opponents ready? My time starts now. To begin with, I want to remind to everyone of the framework of the debate that effectiveness means to alleviate all kinds of people of all kinds of poverty. I'll begin with long-term poverty. Our solution to long-term poverty is education. The World Bank says with 12 years of high quality education, there is only 0.6% of a chance of a family dropping into poverty. Our first solution is to give them 1,500 RMB each year as compensation to keep them in school. This reduced the dropout rate by 60%. Moreover, we can give monetary awards to students who have improvement in their grades or worked hard on their homework. 1.1 million students illegally dropped out in 2018 in the 9 years of compulsory to work. Rewarding them can keep them in school. The government actually already spent 542.6 billion yuan on school facilities. They responded to this by saying that welfare doesn't improve education. Shandong, this evidence, Shandong has overcrowding, but this evidence is from China Daily, and it's from 2016, but our evidence is from 2019. In those years, the government spent 542.6 billion yuan on rural school facilities. So after this much spending, there is still overcrowding, then it is only proves public infrastructure ineffective. Educational covers welfare for people who need it, but only 20 to 30% students go to high school. Going to schools is always better than not going to school, since 12 years can decrease chance of falling into poverty to 0.6%. Then they talk about mistargeting rate. However, like my partners said, the financial crisis, which increased spending on public infrastructure, can lead to has a devastating impact. China has invested so lavishly an infrastructure that over the past decade its endowment of public capital is now richer on a per person basis than that of Germany, Spain, South Korea, or the UK, despite economic output that remains many times lower. Further spending is unlikely to deliver the same kick to gross domestic product as it did in the past. Indeed, it is most likely to reduce the rate of return on future investment. In 2008, extending borrowing was up by 140% of GDP. By the time you get to 2015, it's gone all the way up to 250% of GDP. And when we look around the world, we can actually find in other economies like this, and no one can actually calculate the probability of a financial crisis. Our second solution is vocational training programs. Vocational training programs are effective because after 6 months, it increased the employment rate up to 98.2%, but it is also unaffordable for the poor. They responded to this by saying we need services because it's soft infrastructure. We're not saying we need extra services. We're saying we need to make these programs more affordable for the people in poverty. Second, our solution to short-term poverty. First, we need to expand the pension system since China is facing fast-aging population, and we need to make its benefits equal in ours. Second, disabled people argument, and they responded to this by saying pension has mistargeting and pension already rose. However, this is better than nothing since they didn't give an alternative clean water system. My partner will talk about the corruption of water infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, speaker. Now let's move to speaker 1 of the concise summary speech. You can start when you're ready.
Please running prep.
Granted.
I'm all set.
Please
Can you
stop
pause
the
the time?
timer. Yeah. You can start when you're ready.
My time starts now. So in this debate about whether or not increased spending on welfare or infrastructure can alleviate poverty more effectively, I raised the two contentions that infrastructure creates more job opportunities and that welfare programs are not as useful as infrastructure in fighting rural poverty, like about some counties needing more infrastructure construction and more soft infrastructure services. Our opponents raised the points that welfare programs can stimulate students who have a higher education and that it could help the disabled people. So now I'll respond to a class of whether or not the school condition of the rural places have been alleviated. So one 2019 states in the research done by Wang Xiaobing in 2019, Wang Xiaobing empirically compared the academic performance of students in private migrant schools to that of students in rural public schools, which are to our opponents who stimulated by the government's welfare programs. However, the private schools, the people there were not at all stimulated, and people there were very lazy and they do not like studying. However, the stimulated students were still worse than the students there, and these students are all migrant students, which means that this is a fair competition because the migrant students are not at all adapted to the environment that they're in. So the private migrant schools perform a lot better than the rural public schools. So we can see that the stimulation by the government does not have any any uses because this study shows that private migrant schools is actually better. So also about the disabled people, they talked about how disabled people can only use welfare to survive. However, we believe that the disabled people definitely have a lot of other people in their family that could work.
Is it disconnected? I think he's frozen. Teammate, can you contact your partner?
Yeah, sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, where did I stop?
Somewhere
like,
talking about private schools.
what?
How private
So
schools are
what
better
time was it?
than
Was it?
it was like 10 seconds ago. So you can just start whenever you find yourself cutting off.
Okay, so as I already proved, private migrant schools, the students of private migrant schools perform better than the students of rural public school. Wait, can you reset my timer? Like I think I should have 10 more seconds to speak. Like 30 seconds now. Thank you.
You can continue.
So moving on, they also argue about why China does not need more infrastructure, but organproject.org can prove that China needs more infrastructure because the poverty in China is very severe, and so it says that the rural population makes up roughly 42% of the nation's total population, and a large portion of that population needs more infrastructure. So most of the rural population relies on agriculture. However, the 40% of land in China has fallen victim to land degradation in the form of salinization. This is a form of the lack of infrastructure. And so for these reasons, we urge you to have a con ballot. Thank you.
Thank you, speaker. Now let's move to Grand Crossfire. All speakers, please get ready. And the pro side, you can start by asking your question.
Okay, so time starts now. So first, you talked about something about like the performance between public schools and private migrant schools, but what's private schools got to do with this topic?
We're just comparing the students with good educational results, but the students are all very lazy and not at all adapted to the environment. Two of the students at UC are stimulated by the government and
Okay,
they like
then here's
studying.
a follow-up. I have a follow-up question. So you think that the migrant students don't perform well because they can't adapt to their environment?
Yes, the study
Okay,
clearly
I see.
shows that.
I see. Thank you. Can you ask your question?
So you kept talking about how your evidence shows that China does not need more education, but
Yeah.
how can you respond to our evidence that China does need more education and that your educational stimulating of welfare does not even work?
Well, first, what year is that evidence from?
2019.
Okay,
The
well,
same year as your evidence.
okay, that's true. Okay, here's what I mean. That there might be need for even more education facilities, but since China already spent 542.6 billion yuan on like school facilities, it only proves that infrastructure is ineffective.
Okay, you're not relating that back to the big picture as you suggest we do. And by the way, 99% of all school-age children already participate in your welfare program of the 9-year compulsory.
No, we're not talking about 9-year compulsory. We're talking about we need the students to be able to keep going to school for 3 extra years.
Okay, and how can you ensure that their elementary and middle school lives are so efficient that they can move on to high school and university with quality?
Because we said that there's like this program where they give rewards to students who make progress. So then the students will be incented to do hard on their homework and classwork. And since like there's
Okay.
also another evidence about the subsidies of rural teachers, and
Okay.
I'll talk about that too.
Sure.
And like it's our turn to ask a question. So
Okay.
like my question is that you said that somehow like China needs more spending on infrastructure, right? Like infrastructure is not enough, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, we have evidence that David Fickling said in May 2020 that China has built too much infrastructure too fast, and China has invested so lavishly in infrastructure that it's like much richer than any other economy. So,
Okay.
and my partner also talked about that. So why do you still keep saying that we still need more?
What types of infrastructure?
Pardon?
What types of infrastructure?
No, this evidence is just too much infrastructure. It's
Okay.
not like
Okay, then how do you explain that 20% of people of the population still do not have
Your
Your
access to
time's up.
And so, thank you very much.
clean water system? Thank you.
Okay, now the last round of debate, final focus. Speaker 2 of the pro side, please get ready for final focus.
I would like to use the rest of my prep time. Thank you.
Granted. Your time's up.
Yep. So opponents ready, get ready. My time starts now. So the main clashes of this debate is the education and their job opportunity, and then there's our argument about the pension and disabled, so on. So I will begin with education. What was the main clashes? So in their summary speech, they responded by saying that they gave a study and that these students were not all adapted to the environment of the schools. This has nothing to do with infrastructure because all new students need a time to adapt to the environment. Like if I go to a brilliant school, I still need time to adapt to the school. So they don't make a point in this. And actually, there was close to, Hanushek said in 2015 that there were actually close to 400 studies of student achievement demonstrate that there's not a strong or consistent relationship between student achievement and school resources. And we said throughout the debate that like, the government has already spent 542.6 billion yuan. So if you need even more spending on public infrastructure, like educational infrastructure, then it only proves that that's ineffective. However, what we're telling you is that we want to, how do we like guarantee the quality of education? We can give special rewards to students who perform well or improve a lot in their schoolwork. And then we can keep these students in high school by giving them 1,500 each year. Families keep their students in school, and then so we won this class, and then on to the one about how about pension and disabled. They talk about how we need services. Actually, we're not saying that we need services. We're saying that these people can't even afford these care homes, and that care homes don't even give good good care, because normally one individual has to care for 10 people that are disabled, but in America, like 4 people care for only 1 disabled people. So we see the gap here. So we're not, and if the infrastructure is good enough, then a woman won't drug your son, but she will send her son to a care home. So I believe we won this debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, speaker. Now, speaker 2 of the con side, please get ready for a final speech, final focus speech.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Judges ready? Opponents ready? My time will start now. Today we have operation on top, which benefits a total of the 50 million people who remains unemployed. 50 million compared to the disability of the other team in knowing their mistargeting and their disruptive problems that they have not explained how to solve and welfare distribution problems is a great lead. Today, our slide told you that infrastructure investment brings job increases that data refused to include in their calculation of direct job creation. We said that China is in need of a new wave of jobs, one creatable only by infrastructure. The other side today made the following mistakes. First, they listed numbers that appear to be sensible but do not relate the statistics back to the holistic view. Second, they forget the secondary and tertiary levels of infrastructure job creation. Third, they assume that people still left in poverty after participating in welfare hold the same traits as the ones that have been helped. They do not look at the possibilities of financial crisis, which they deem to have a huge risk of infrastructure. Fifth, they make a difference between none and is when it should be is and quality right now. Sixth, they send a wrong and pessimistic signal that the disabled should just live with support from the public through taxes. Seventh, they intrude upon grounds of infrastructure when they mention adult education, soft infrastructure. Also, they set double standards. Infrastructure examples need to be related back to the big picture, but they can use separate scenarios of water, education, health without relating it back to the big picture. Also, they focus on all subjects, but the one that will actually bring money, jobs. They unsuccessfully talk about all subjects that keep people alive, but they do not care about the action that will improve and show progress. Instead of making these errors, including assuming children and families see the purpose of education, we connect infrastructure's individual debt to the countries to show its insignificance. We look at the possibilities of who are left and how it affects our choice. We focus on a progressive subject that will benefit the people in the country. All in all, we believe that Khan has won the debate today. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for a great debate today. And now, judges, could you please do the vote in the mini program?
Oh, because I was switched here. So I got switched from the middle school final. I don't have the mini program on my phone, I think.
Ooh, then I think you can just privately message the host, I guess. Just message her.
Oh wait, I think they just refreshed the mini program, so I can see it from my phone right now. Never mind, it's okay.
Yay.
Can we have like a couple more minutes to make the decision? Like just a few more minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have the final result. Host, can you see the result in the mini program? Debaters, thank you for your patience. Give us a couple more seconds to check the final result.
So the winning team is Kansai. Congratulations. And judges, do you have any feedback?
Yeah, I can go first. So first of all, I want to say that you both teams did a very good job and you've already made to semifinal, actually just the final. So definitely good job. And I do want to say that as you can see in the voting result, it's a 2-3 ballot. So there's not a huge gap between your performances. Both of you did very good in some points and both of you have huge rooms of improvement in others. I would like to explain why I voted for the Kong ballot. So I have 6 criteria that I judged. The first is analysis of major points. I think Kong wins that one because in your constructive speech, you mentioned not only the effect of infrastructure on poverty alleviation, but also provide comparative analysis of why do you think the other system is not good as yours. I do know that there are a lot of comparative analysis in the pro argument in your future rounds of rebuttal and summary and etc. But considering the coverage of major points in general, I think the Kansai did a slightly better job. And then the second criteria is reasoning. I think pro side wins this point because I think you use arguments and evidence very on point, and that your opponents have sometimes very sensitive and even a little bit problematic reasoning. For instance, when the Kansai talks about school education, especially private schools for immigrant students, you use the word lazy, which I think is super sensitive, and especially when there is public forum debate discussing social problems, you definitely should be more careful using more appropriate sentences. However, there is also a mistake that the pro side made. You mentioned that you don't think the Tibet example works, but you didn't explain why you're not okay with individual examples in detail. I think that corresponds a lot with your final focus, and if you could further elaborate that on during the rebuttal speech, that could do way better of an argument, but still you win that section. The third criteria is responding to arguments. This is kind of hard to judge because both teams have some points unresolved, but I do think I voted for Khan for that because specifically I heard that in your final focus speech, there are a lot of consistent points relinking all the major clashes and discussions that you had during the debate. So I had a more holistic review and feel like the Khan should win. But I do want to point out that for the Kang side, especially in Crossfire 1, your opponent mentioned repeatedly that you don't have direct evidence, and that your evidence is an American data, and that you actually said that it's commonsensical. However, as a public forum debate, war policy debate, there's no commonsensical things. If you're making an assertive argument, you need to prove that. And I do think this is something that you should work on in the future, especially during crossfires. Even if you don't have evidence, don't say it that way. Just try to be more careful. And for the pro side, I think you had a very good argument concerning short-term versus long-term, but I think in your summary speech, you didn't do a very good reasoning project of why do you think that is the case and how that exactly works with these mechanisms available. So I do think your argument and your debate could benefit a lot if you could focus more on that. The next criteria is evidence. As I've mentioned before, I think both teams have problems, and I didn't judge much on that. I think the pro side, in your constructive speech, you mentioned an example of disability kids and mom. I do think that it's a good technique to appeal to emotions. However, when you want to say about generality of disability problems, individual example is not representative of the case and might not be the perfect evidence. And then the fifth criteria is crossfire, which means the interaction between the team members. I think pro side did a slightly better job because first you have more cooperation between partners, you address your partner and their point more. And also I think the Kang side need, what is this? Oh, and the Kang side admits a lot of the yes or no questions in the crossfire. I would say that you shouldn't actually respond to a question proving your opponent's argument, even if you think that it might be the same case in your argument, just elaborate that more. I do expect more follow-up sentences in your crossfire. And then finally, delivery of the debate. I think Kang wins that one because you generally have less language fillers, you have more assertive sentences, you have more to the point arguments and appealing to emotions. So in general, I think that is a very close round. It's really hard for me to judge, but based on the 6 criteria that I've mentioned above, Kang side is the winning side, and congratulations to both sides. Have a great one.
I can briefly explain when I ended up voting for pro. I think both sides has spent a lot of time attacking about the evidence level, but for this topic, it's more important to go behind the methodology and actually internal link between each argument. So I think for both sides, you have given us a lot of numbers about how welfare or infrastructure has helped to alleviate poverty, but no one actually looked into the pattern of poverty, like how was poverty actually formed, and in which process could we improve better. And I ended up voting for pro for 2 main reasons. First, feasibility, second, effectiveness. Thank you. Have a nice one. Are there any more judges willing to give out feedback or reason for decision?
Well, okay, so it was a close round, and I think both teams did well. But then, like the first judge said, this is a public forum debate, and then when you make your claims, try to support your arguments with a lot of evidence, and make sure that the sources of your evidence are credible enough. And my decision, what informed my decision for voting con was that I thought most of the arguments from the con team were very convincing. And then I had problems with the rebuttal from the pro team. Your rebuttal was lacking a lot of evidence. You just rebutted without so much support or so much cited data to support your claims. If you if you rebut your opponent's argument without any substantial evidence, it makes it like you're just talking out of logic. This is a public forum debate, and we deal with facts and evidences that have very credible sources. So try to check that. But then apart from that, I think you both did well. It was like, congratulations to the con team. Thank you.
Yeah, I also think this is a close one for me. So just to add like 1 point upon previous judges. Yeah, so for pro, really try to improve on your rebuttal and responses to your opponents. Because I feel like a lot of the materials, especially in your former half of the debate, when you're like responding to their arguments, it's a bit too assertive, as it appears to me. So try to really fill in more of the logical links in between when you're like trying to give a kind of like logical analysis and explanation of things, and to try to take the best version of your opponent's point in order to rebut it. Like, so even if they've got some kinds of like problems when they're like arguing their points, but really try to respond to like the best and strongest version of that, and to give like more direct kinds of like weigh-ins and rebuttal. It's in the sense like that is kind of like supported with logical analysis or more sufficient evidence in the sense. But I actually think pro side has done a quite good job in your like latter half of the debate. But anyway, I think throughout, yeah, it appears to me a quite close round, but I still vote for like Con in the end, but overall good for both sides.
Yeah, I think both teams did a really good job, and I'll just add a couple points. I voted for the pro side because I think generally the pro side ended up with more standing contentions that are actually backed up with evidence that make more sense and have a greater impact. And I think the con side did a pretty good job trying to attack the pro side with their like logical problems. But I think you generally need more evidence to back up what you're saying. And this the pro side also like lacks some further elaboration because you guys have some points that I think you could have expanded on, but you guys were like devoting a lot of time on checking the evidence and checking the credibility. But you could have expanded more on your own points, and I think that it would have been better in that way. But generally, you guys all did a really good job, and I think it's a really close debate. And congratulations.
Thank you, contestants, and thank you, judges. So, congratulations, winning team. So, I need to end this meeting. Goodbye. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, opponents. Thank you, judges.
Thank you all.
Thank you, opponents. Thank you, judge.
Thank you.